Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people story. Imagine your neighbor from hell files a legal complaint against you. But she's so arrogant, she doesn't read the law she's citing. She thought she'd get my ugly signs taken down. Instead, she legally forced me to put up 47 of them. And that one mistake triggered a chain reaction that cost her over $50,000 and destroyed her reputation forever. I bought my property about 5 years ago. 3 acres, mostly wooded, with a nice clearing where the house sits and a small creek running through the back portion. It's rural enough to feel private, but close enough to town that I can get groceries in 10 minutes. The previous owners were an older couple who'd lived there for 30 years. They were great neighbors, kept to themselves, waved when they saw you, that kind of thing. When they decided to downsize and move closer to their kids, I was sorry to see them go. The house sat on the market for about 4 months before someone finally bought it. That someone was Karen. I should mention that Karen isn't her real name, but you'll understand why I'm using it in a minute. The problem started almost immediately. The first week she moved in, I was out in my backyard working on building some raised garden beds. I'd been planning this project for months. I wanted to grow vegetables and maybe some herbs. I'd bought the lumber, laid everything out, and was in the middle of assembling the first frame when I heard someone walking up behind me. I turned around and there was this woman I'd never met, standing about 15 feet into my property, looking around like she owned the place. "Hi there," I said, trying to be friendly. "You must be the new neighbor. She cut me off. "Is this your property?" She gestured vaguely at the woods behind my house. "Yeah," I said. "My lot goes back to the creek and then follows the tree line over there." I pointed to show her the general boundaries. She frowned. "Huh, I thought that was all public land. The woods, I mean." I shook my head. "Nope, it's all mine. The property survey is on file with the county if you want to check it out. When I bought the place, I had it professionally surveyed and marked." She didn't look happy about this, but she nodded and walked back toward her house without introducing herself or really saying anything else. It was weird, but I figured maybe she was just awkward or having a bad day. Moving is stressful. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. Over the next few months, I started noticing Karen on my property fairly regularly. Sometimes she'd be walking through the woods on my land. Other times, I'd catch her near the creek. Once I found her sitting on my back porch reading a book like it was the most natural thing in the world. Each time, I'd politely remind her that this was private property and ask her to stay on her own land. She'd apologize, sort of, and leave, but then she'd be back a week or two later doing the same thing. I tried to be understanding. Maybe she genuinely didn't realize where the property line was, so I went out and bought some private property signs and posted them at reasonable intervals along the boundary between our properties and at the main entry points to my land. Nothing crazy, just standard signs you can buy at any hardware store. That's when things escalated. Instead of respecting the signs, she started doing it more blatantly, almost like she was daring me to do something about it. She'd walk right through the middle of my yard in broad daylight. I'd see her from my kitchen window, just strolling across my lawn like she was taking a shortcut. Then she got a dog. Now, I like dogs. I don't have anything against them. But this dog was a massive Great Dane that she apparently had no interest in training or controlling. She'd let it out in her yard, which wasn't fenced, and it would immediately run onto my property. The dog would tear through my yard, dig holes, and leave massive piles of waste everywhere. I went over to talk to her about it. I knocked on her door, and when she answered, I very calmly explained that her dog kept coming onto my property and causing problems. I asked if she could keep it leashed or build a fence. She told me, and I'm not exaggerating, that dogs need to run free and that it was cruel to keep them confined. She said if I didn't like it, I should build my own fence. I pointed out that it was her responsibility to control her animal, not my responsibility to keep it out. She closed the door in my face. The dog thing continued for weeks. I'd be out working in my garden, and this massive dog would come bounding through, knocking over plants, digging in the beds I'd just built. I'd have to stop what I was doing and walk the dog back to her property, where Karen would be sitting on her porch watching the whole thing like it was entertaining. Then came the incident that made me decide to stop being nice. I'd been working on my garden for about 2 months at this point. I'd built 4 raised beds, filled them with good soil, and planted tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, and some herbs. I was really proud of it. I'd spent probably 40 hours of work over several weekends building everything and getting it established, plus about $300 on materials and another $80 on plants and seeds. One morning I went out to water everything and found the entire garden destroyed. My tomato plants were completely pulled out, roots and all, scattered across the yard. The pepper plants were snapped off at the base. 3 of the 4 raised beds were knocked over completely, with the corner posts cracked and the wood panels split apart. Dirt was everywhere, spread across probably 15 feet of lawn. There were massive paw prints in the remaining soil, and I found claw marks gouged into what was left of the wooden frames. I was furious. I took photos of everything, then went straight to Karen's house. I knocked on her door and told her what had happened. I showed her the photos on my phone. Her dog had destroyed hours of work and hundreds of dollars worth of materials and plants. She looked at the photos and shrugged. I didn't see anything. How do you know it was my dog? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. There are paw prints the size of dinner plates all over my garden. You're the only person around here with a dog that big. She crossed her arms. Prove it. That's when I decided I was done playing nice. I went to the hardware store and bought 4 security cameras with night vision and motion detection. I spent a weekend installing them at strategic points around my property, covering all the main entry points in my backyard. The cameras fed to my phone and my computer, and they kept rolling recordings stored in the cloud. I didn't have to wait long. 3 days after I installed the cameras, I got a motion alert on my phone at around 2 in the afternoon. I pulled up the live feed and watched Karen walking through my backyard, cutting across from one side of my property to the other. She wasn't even trying to be subtle about it. She was following what looked like a worn path she'd created from repeated trips. I saved the video. Over the next 2 weeks, I caught her trespassing 6 more times on camera. I also caught her dog running loose on my property multiple times, including one incident where it dug up what was left of my garden again. I compiled all the videos, made a folder with the timestamps and dates, and went to see a lawyer. The lawyer I found specialized in property disputes and neighbor issues. I showed him everything. The videos, the photos of the damage, my documentation of every time I'd asked Karen to stop trespassing. Everything. He watched the videos, looked through all my documentation, and then leaned back in his chair. "This is pretty straightforward," he said. "You've got clear evidence of repeated trespassing and property damage. You've asked her to stop multiple times. You've posted signs." She's ignored all of it. He drafted a cease and desist letter that laid out everything. The trespassing, the property damage, the repeated requests for her to stop. It stated clearly that any further trespassing would result in legal action, and that she was liable for all damages her dog had caused. We sent it certified mail so there'd be proof she received it. She signed for it on a Tuesday. That Friday, I got a motion alert around 8 in the evening. I pulled up the camera feed and there was Karen walking through my property with her dog off leash. She walked right past one of my private property signs, looked directly at one of the cameras, and kept going. I called my lawyer first thing Monday morning. "She's doing it on purpose now," he said after I sent him the video. "This is going to be easy." We filed a civil lawsuit for trespassing, property damage, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. We included all the videos, all the documentation, photos of the damage, and receipts for everything I'd had to replace or repair. We also filed for a restraining order. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for about 3 weeks out. In the meantime, I also went to the police and filed reports for each instance of trespassing I had on video after she'd received the cease and desist letter. The police told me that since I had clear video evidence and she'd been formally notified to stay off my property, they could cite her for each violation. During this whole process, she kept trespassing. I'm not kidding. Even with a pending lawsuit and police reports filed, she continued to walk through my property. It was like she either didn't believe I'd actually follow through or she just didn't care. My cameras caught her 8 more times over those 3 weeks. The restraining order hearing was brief. My lawyer presented the evidence, the videos, the police reports, the cease and desist letter she'd ignored. Karen showed up without a lawyer and tried to argue that she had a right to walk through the woods because they'd always been public access according to the previous owners. The judge asked her if she had any evidence that there was an easement or any legal right to access my property. She didn't. She just kept insisting that the previous owners had let people walk through. The judge explained that even if that were true, which there was no evidence for, property rights don't work that way. The previous owners couldn't grant permanent access rights to someone else's future property, and regardless, I was the current owner and I'd made it crystal clear she wasn't allowed on my land. He granted the restraining order. Karen was legally prohibited from coming within 100 feet of me or my property. She wasn't happy about it, but there wasn't much she could do, except apparently file a complaint with the county about my signs. About 2 weeks after the restraining order was issued, I got a notice from the county code enforcement office. Karen had filed a formal complaint claiming that my private property signs were excessive, ugly, and constituted harassment. She cited a specific county ordinance number and demanded that the county enforce the exact specifications for posted property signs. I read the complaint 3 times trying to figure out what she was thinking. Then I called my lawyer. He read through the complaint and the ordinance she'd cited, and then he started laughing. "She just made a huge mistake," he said. "This ordinance she's demanding you follow, it requires more signs than you currently have, not fewer." I didn't understand at first, so he explained it to me. The county ordinance Karen had cited was designed to eliminate any ambiguity about posted property. It specified exactly how posted property signs had to be installed: the wording, the size, the height above ground, and the spacing. Signs had to be posted every 50 feet along the entire property boundary, plus additional signs at every entry point, plus signs along any driveways or paths, plus signs that were visible from all commonly traveled approaches. The ordinance was actually pretty strict. It required way more signs than most people bothered with. Most property owners just put up a few signs here and there and called it good enough, and the county didn't enforce the ordinance unless someone complained. Karen had just formally complained and demanded enforcement. "So what do we do?" I asked. "We comply," my lawyer said, and I could hear the grin in his voice. "She's demanding that you follow this specific ordinance, so we're going to follow it exactly, to the letter." I hired a surveyor to come out and mark the exact intervals required by the ordinance Karen had cited. Then I ordered 47 professional signs, proper metal signs with the exact wording specified in the county code. I had them installed at the precise heights and spacing required by law every 50 feet along my entire property boundary, plus extras at all the entry points and along my driveway. My property looked absolutely ridiculous. There were signs everywhere, but every single one was exactly what the county ordinance required, and Karen had demanded in writing that I comply with that ordinance. The installation took 2 days. When it was finished, I took photos of every sign from multiple angles to document that everything was in full compliance. I wasn't there when Karen first saw them, but my other neighbor told me the story later. Apparently, she came outside that morning, saw all the signs, and just stood in her driveway with her mouth hanging open. Then she got in her car and drove straight to the county offices. The county official she spoke to, according to what my lawyer heard later, told her that I was simply complying with her written demand that I follow the county ordinance specifications for posted property. She'd filed a formal complaint citing that specific ordinance number and demanding enforcement. Well, they'd enforced it. Karen apparently lost her mind. She screamed that this wasn't what she meant, that I was making a mockery of her complaint, that the signs were even worse now. The official told her that's not how legal complaints work. You can't demand enforcement of a specific law and then complain when that law is actually enforced. She could file another complaint if she believed the signs didn't meet the ordinance requirements, but the county had already inspected them and verified that every sign was in full compliance with the exact rules she'd demanded be enforced. That evening, Karen came to my property line, notably not crossing it this time, and started shouting at me from the road. She said I was harassing her, that I'd done this deliberately to make her look stupid, that she was going to make sure I paid for this. I stood on my porch and told her very calmly that I was simply complying with the county ordinance she'd demanded I follow. If she had a problem with the county's rules, she should take it up with them. She was furious, but there was nothing she could do. She demanded this exact outcome in writing. A few weeks later, we had the county hearing about her complaint. It took place in a small conference room at the county offices. Karen showed up with a whole presentation. She had printed photos of my signs from multiple angles, arranged in a binder with tabs. She had written testimony from 2 of her friends who lived in the neighborhood, claiming the signs made the area look trashy. She even had a printout of comparable home sale prices, trying to claim the signs were hurting her property value. She spoke for probably 20 minutes, getting increasingly emotional, talking about how I was deliberately trying to make her life miserable and how the signs were excessive and unnecessary. Then it was my turn. My lawyer had prepared everything in advance. He started with a timeline document showing every instance of trespassing, starting from the very first incident. Each entry had a date, time, description, and corresponding evidence reference number. Then he played selected video clips, not all of them, that would have taken hours, but a compilation showing her trespassing on multiple occasions, her dog causing damage, and her generally ignoring the property line even after the initial signs went up. He presented the police reports, the cease and desist letter, the certified mail receipt showing she'd received it, more videos of her trespassing after receiving the letter, the restraining order. Then he presented the county's own ordinances. He had the code book with highlighted sections showing that not only were my signs legal, but that the specific ordinance Karen had cited in her complaint actually required the number and placement of signs I'd installed. He even had a letter from the county code enforcement office confirming that they'd inspected the signs and found them in full compliance with the ordinance Karen had demanded be enforced. The whole presentation took about 35 minutes. The county official, a woman probably in her 50s who looked thoroughly tired of dealing with frivolous complaints, listened to everything, took notes, and asked a few clarifying questions. Then she excused both of us from the room while she made her decision. We waited in the hallway for maybe 10 minutes. Karen wouldn't look at me. She just sat there staring at her phone. When we were called back in, the official had her decision typed up and ready to sign. The complaint was denied. All of my signs were in full compliance with county ordinances. Moreover, since Karen had filed a complaint demanding enforcement of a specific ordinance and that ordinance had been enforced exactly as written, there were no grounds for her complaint. Then came the part that made the whole thing worth it. The official stated that based on the evidence presented, Karen's complaint appeared to be frivolous and filed in bad faith as a form of continued harassment following the restraining order. Under county ordinances, frivolous complaints could result in fines and the complainant could be required to pay the legal fees of the person they'd filed against. Karen was fined $800 for filing a frivolous complaint. She was also ordered to pay my legal fees for having to defend against her complaint, which came to about $1,200. She looked like she'd been slapped. But we weren't done yet. The civil lawsuit was still ongoing. Between the initial filing and the hearing about the signs, about 8 months had passed. Karen had continued to rack up trespassing violations during that time, though she'd been somewhat more careful after the restraining order was issued. The county had a system where property owners could file complaints for code violations, including trespassing on posted property. Since I had video evidence and she'd violated the restraining order multiple times, I filed a complaint for each violation. This pattern continued for weeks. Every time she trespassed, I filed a complaint with the county code enforcement office. They'd send an officer to verify the violation using my video evidence, then issue her a citation. She could have contested each one, but she never showed up to the hearings, so the fines were automatically assessed. The fine started at $250 per violation and increased with each repeat offense, $500, $750, $1,000. By the time she finally stopped, we're talking about 8 separate violations with fines totaling over $5,000. The civil suit was settled about 14 months after we filed it. Karen's lawyer, she'd finally gotten one, recommended she settle because the evidence against her was overwhelming. She'd been caught on video trespassing dozens of times, violating a restraining order, and causing documented property damage. The settlement included compensation for all the property damage. The destroyed garden, the ruined plants, the broken raised beds, everything. It included my legal fees. It included compensation for my time and emotional distress. The total came out to somewhere around $15,000. Karen also had to pay her own legal fees, which I heard were substantial. But the financial consequences were just the beginning. Karen's problems didn't end with the settlement and fines. The combination of the $15,000 civil judgment, the unpaid county fines that had created a lien on her property, and her legal fees from defending the lawsuit apparently created a cascade of financial problems. I heard from another neighbor that she'd tried to refinance her mortgage to pay everything off, but the lien and the judgment made that impossible. The lien had to be paid before any refinancing could happen, but she didn't have the cash available. She tried to sell the house, but the combination of the legal issues and her reputation in the neighborhood meant she got nothing but lowball offers. Real estate agents apparently told her that having an active restraining order and documented legal disputes with neighbors is a huge red flag for potential buyers. One agent supposedly told her friend that the property was legally contaminated. The county eventually filed a lien against her property for the unpaid trespassing fines. That lien is a matter of public record attached to the property deed. Anyone doing a title search would see it immediately. She ended up having to sell at roughly $40,000 less than she'd paid for the house just 2 years earlier, in a market where property values in our area had actually gone up by about 15%. After paying off the liens, the civil judgment, and her remaining legal fees, she apparently walked away with almost nothing. But here's the thing that really made this permanent. Because of the restraining order and the civil judgment on her record, she now has a documented history of property disputes and harassment that follows her everywhere. My lawyer explained that these kinds of judgments show up on background checks that landlords and HOAs run. They're public record. Anyone can look them up. Good luck renting a nice place or buying into a decent neighborhood when a basic search shows you've been legally determined to be a harassing neighbor who violates restraining orders. The new neighbors who bought her house are great, by the way. They're a younger couple with a baby. Before they closed on the house, they actually came over to introduce themselves and ask me about the neighborhood. They said they'd met Karen once during the showing. She'd still been living there at the time, and she'd tried to warn them about me being a difficult neighbor. That had raised some red flags for them, so they went to the county records office and pulled all the public documents about our dispute. They read the restraining order, they read the civil suit settlement, they saw the county hearing decision. After reading everything, they knew exactly who the problem had been, and it wasn't me. We've become friends. They've got my number if they need anything. Their kid is adorable. As for Karen, last I heard she moved out about a year ago. I have no idea where she went, and I don't particularly care. The property looks better now than it did when she lived there. The new owners have been fixing it up and actually maintaining it properly. My garden is thriving again. I rebuilt all the raised beds, better this time, with stronger materials. I've got tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, herbs, and I even added some strawberries this year. No dogs digging through it, no uninvited visitors walking across my lawn. The 47 signs are still up, every single one of them. They're a constant reminder of the time someone tried to weaponize county ordinances against me and ended up destroying their own life in the process. I take care of my property, I mind my own business, I don't bother anyone. But if someone decides to repeatedly trespass, cause damage, and then try to use the legal system to harass me, well, I've got cameras, documentation, and a really good lawyer, and apparently a lot of signs. The next one is a malicious compliance story. I used to work at a large telecommunications company. Above me was my manager, Albert. Above him was another manager, Barry. Above him was a senior manager, Colette. Those are not their real names. My job was to provide management reporting, which I did mostly through Excel. I made fairly fancy graphs, used some macros, and built reports with a whole array of formulas, including array formulas. Colette was a young, ambitious manager who knew how to network, say the right things to the right people, and sound confident whether or not she had any clue about whatever she was managing. Consequently, she had been over-promoted, Peter Principal style, into a role she struggled with. But because of her personality, she continued to act as if she was fully in control and wanted to show everyone her excellent management. One of her traits, which I had witnessed on the rare occasions when I, as the data expert in my area, was invited into a meeting with her to help explain data issues, was that her reaction to hearing about a problem was always the same. She would immediately decide something needed to be done and that she needed to be kept informed of progress on a weekly basis. That might make sense for a serious issue. It did not make sense for minor issues that she should have trusted lower-level staff to handle. Barry was an experienced, ambitious middle manager who wanted to be promoted into senior management. In his view, and he was probably correct, the way to reach that goal was to tell Colette exactly what she wanted to hear. If Colette had a target of reaching 1,000 widgets, Barry would tell her we had made 1,000 widgets, whether or not we actually had. Albert had worked at the company for 25 years. He was good at his job, but he was past the point of caring enough to fight for doing things properly. He mostly wanted an easy time while he looked toward retirement. If Barry asked him for something ridiculous, Albert would say it was ridiculous. But if Barry still wanted it, Albert would instantly capitulate. Then there was me, at the bottom of the chain, actually making the reports they wanted. They had no idea how I did it. This was an era when many managers in their 40s and 50s had grown up without computers and could barely sum a few numbers in Excel without help. They treated the pretty graphs, macros, and calculated cells as genuine magic. They had no understanding of whether a task took 10 minutes or 10 hours, or whether something was manual or automatic. I hated it whenever they had a meeting and Colette demanded a new report on something as a knee-jerk reaction. I knew that 90% of the time by the end of the week she would have forgotten she had asked for it. If the problem was not serious, she would never even look at the report unless the issue came up again in another meeting. This particular year, I was extra busy. We had gone through redundancies because of the global financial crisis, so I was effectively doing 2 roles at once. One day, Albert told me that Barry had told him that during their managers' meeting, Colette had said she needed a new weekly report showing the top 3 colors of widgets. I explained to Albert that the colors were irrelevant. The widgets came in whatever color the supplier sent, and they were buried in the ground, so nobody saw them anyway. There was no possible reason for Colette to care about widget color at a senior level. Albert agreed. He said he had already explained that to Barry, but Barry had said Colette wanted it, so we had to make it anyway, so I made the report. It took about 40 minutes to run each week because it involved a slightly fiddly manual copy and paste process from a system we had no budget to automate. I placed it in the shared folder where Colette could access it and sent an email to all 3 of them with a link to the folder. For 8 weeks I did that. I heard absolutely nothing about it from anyone. I suspected nobody was looking at it because Colette had probably forgotten she asked for it 10 minutes after the meeting ended. I explained to Albert that I did not have time to keep making those reports if nobody was looking at them anyway. I had other, more important work to do, and those tasks would either be late or low quality if I kept wasting time on this pointless report. I told him I had too much on my plate and asked if I could stop making it. He said no, because Barry does not want to stop making something Colette asked for. You need to keep making the report. Even though it is not useful anyway? They are probably not even looking at it. Yes, you have to keep making the file weekly. So far the folder contained Widget Color Report Week 1 8 XLs. What a productive 5 hours, I thought. 8 files full of pretty graphs that nobody would ever look at. It might as well not have anything. And then I had an idea. That week I opened a blank Excel file. I changed the text to bold red, font size 18. Right in the middle of sheet 1 I wrote, "Error with data upload. Data link failed. Error code 2387AGT. Then I clicked Save As and saved it in the folder as Widget Color Report Week 9 XLS. Technically, I had still made a report, right? There it was, sitting in the folder. A week went by. Nobody said anything, so I copied the Week 9 file, pasted it into the folder, and changed the 9 to a 10. Widget Color Report Week 10 DexLS. Another blank Excel file saying, "Error with data upload. Data link failed. Error code 2387AGT. After about 5 months of copying that same file and turning my 40-minute report into a 4-second task, which was one of my most efficient pieces of work ever, I finally got Albert to review my workload. He agreed that something needed to stop. In addition to some reports I genuinely did make, which really did take time and which I was allowed to drop, I casually mentioned one more thing. Oh, and there is that weekly widget color report. I know Barry still wants it, but I just realized yesterday that there is some problem with the data upload, and it has not been working for the last few weeks. They do not seem to have noticed, though, so perhaps they are not actually looking at it. Albert believed the line about the fictional data upload because it all sounded like technical wizardry to him. He simply agreed and said, "Okay, stop making it. If Barry asks for it again, we will have to investigate the problem with this data upload." "I'm confident we can fix it if needed," I said, grinning. "It probably just needs a bit of Control-C, Control-V work done on it." The next one is an entitled people story. My husband's cousin ruined my wedding and keeps making my life hell. I am 21, and I got married at 19 in a big South Asian wedding. Before I explain what happened, here is some quick backstory. My husband has a cousin whom I will call A. She is 35. Her marriage failed a few years before my wedding, and she was practically raised by my mother-in-law, so they are very close. A month before my wedding, we had a henna night. I showed up wearing the exact same colors I had planned to wear. The outfit was actually her own henna outfit from her canceled wedding. She knew what I was going to wear, but when she was confronted, she denied it. Fast forward to my wedding day. I was hidden away before my entrance, excited and nervous, when my bridesmaids FaceTimed me to show me the hall. That was when I saw A wearing a red and gold bridal dress. In South Asian weddings, red is the traditional bridal color. A wore her actual wedding dress, even though she had told people she would be wearing gold. I wore white, but it still caused confusion in photos, and guests were whispering, "Who's the bride?" It was humiliating. She had cut the train off her dress to make it different, but it did not help. She took photos on the stage when I was not there, did not congratulate us, and did not even give us a card. This was not about gifts. It was about basic respect. Then she started drama. When it was time to leave for my husband's house, A told my mother-in-law that one of my uncles had threatened to break her legs. I was right there when my uncle actually spoke to her. What he said was, "She's like your sister now, you should have each other's backs." I twisted his words, lied, and turned my wedding day into a family argument. At one point, I was ready to get out of the car and fight her, but everyone held me back. I tried to stay classy, but it was so difficult seeing two families fighting because of her. When we got to my husband's house, we did the usual games, but everything was awkward. Later, I overheard them still talking about the drama, so I walked in and asked, "What's the problem now?" A had the nerve to ask whether I was jealous of her. I said, "Jealous of what exactly? I'm 19, you're 35, you wore your bridal dress to my wedding and you made everyone miserable." We tried to talk it out privately, but she kept bad-mouthing my family. I told her never to mention my family again. After that, things only got worse. My husband believed me because he knows what she is like. The next day, it came out that my mother-in-law and A's mom had both told her to get a new dress. They had even offered to buy one for her, but she refused because she wanted to wear her wedding dress. Apparently, she had decided she was going to do it from the day I got engaged. A week later, we visited her after she had surgery and brought chocolates. I greeted her, and she lifted her eye mask, looked me up and down, and put it back down without saying a word. I was done. I told my in-laws I would never greet her again. As a Muslim, if someone greets you, you are supposed to greet them back, and she could not even give me that basic respect. Another time, she randomly started screaming, "I'm not going to another ducking wedding after last time," so I left. The worst incident happened during a family funeral when she started cussing out my husband for dropping his nan home. She started calling him names, and when my brother-in-law asked her to move, she started screaming. She called me a crackhead and said, "Over a girl who's barely been here 5 minutes." At that point, I lost it. I was pacing around, ready to throw her out of the house, and I rang my husband to come home before I physically removed her myself. He came home within 5 minutes, and she stormed out screaming at her mom to leave with her. About a month ago, I finally exploded. We were at another family gathering, and my husband was paying back some wedding expenses to his mom. His mom started lecturing us about saving money and about when we lived in her house, going on in front of around 5 people. Every time my mother-in-law took another dig at us, I could see A smirking while massaging Grandma's feet, clearly enjoying it. I tried to be polite and said, "Can we not talk about money problems right now?" I also mentioned that there was a certain someone there, so I did not want our money discussed in front of everyone. I stepped out to take a call, and while I was on the phone, I heard A laughing and mocking us. She said, "What am I going to do with 2,000 pounds?" and kept making digs about our finances. I snapped. I got up and shouted, "Hey, why the duck are you talking about something you know nothing about?" She pulled the "I'm 35, respect me" card, and I yelled back, "Have you seen yourself? You're a stupid ducking idiot." I was about to leave, but then I turned back, ready to hit her. My husband had to drag me upstairs to calm me down while I was still shouting. Honestly, it was all a blur. I was shouting God knows what, and I cannot even remember everything I said. I completely blacked out from anger. Her mom came upstairs to check on me, but I had years of built-up anger over how A ruined my wedding, made every family gathering awkward, and kept poking at me. They expect me to sit in the same room pretending we are a happy family while she smirks and takes digs at me? Earlier that same day, I had invited my mother-in-law to visit our place. They still had not come since we moved out. I also said to let another cousin, B, know that she could join. My mother-in-law told me I should not have said that in front of A. Once again, I was made out to be the bad guy, with everyone saying I handled it wrong. But why was our money situation being discussed in front of her in the first place? When plans were made without me and in front of me, I was told I was overreacting. I was told A did not like me, and that it was her choice if she did not want to be around me. They would all go out, and I would only find out when my mother-in-law came back and told me, after I had been sitting at home all day waiting for my husband to come back from work. Where was the fairness then? Now my mother-in-law and A's mom have decided that from now on, A and I will not be in the same room for gatherings. That means Eid, family dinners, birthdays, and everything else. Either she is there, or I am there. Not both. I think it is so unfair. I am the newly married daughter-in-law in this family, yet I am the one expected to change everything. A did not even invite anyone to her own wedding, so why can she not go to her in-laws? Why should I give up my place in my own husband's family because she cannot act right? People said that if I had hit her, she would have called the police. Honestly, I am tired of being the one who has to be the bigger person, while she keeps getting away with her behavior. Am I wrong for finally standing up for myself, or should I just keep the peace to avoid more drama? Anyway, thank you for watching.